Okay, so I am super excited to introduce Naemul Hassan. He received his PhD from the University of Texas, Arlington. Just like me, he was at a previous university before he joined UMD. And just like me, we both just finished our first year. So woo, go us. We are no longer going to be the newest cohort at the iSchool. So my expertise is this blend of math learning and HCI, and his expertise is computational journalism. So it's this perfect blend. It fits him. He's half in the iSchool and half in the Philip Morris College of Journalism. So this newest work that he's going to present today, it's going to be a complete 180 turn from my presentation, but it's even more thought-provoking and important, and it requires this, computational journalism. I am super excited about this. That was a very casual introduction, but Naemul, yay, I'm so excited.
Thanks for the awesome introduction, Carol. Hello, everyone. I'm Naemul Hassan, and today's talk is about what we can learn about the Me Too movement, learn about the sexual violence from the Me Too movement. A couple of disclaimers before I start. So this work is about analyzing sexual violence victims' self-reports in social media to understand the extent of the problem. And the team members and I am not a sexual violence expert, so we're looking at these reports from information science journalism perspective. This presentation contains some coarse words. It mentions repeatedly about sexual violence, even though there is no image of any sexual nature, but there are text that refers to sexual violence, which can be uncomfortable for some people. So if you want, you can leave and come back after 25 minutes. With that, let's start. So sexual violence is defined as a sexual act that is committed or attempted by another person without freely given consent of the victim or against someone who is unable to consent or refuse. And 35% of women worldwide have experienced sexual violence at least once in their lifetime. So you're imagining about 1 in 3 people, they have already experienced sexual violence. But are we looking at the comprehensive picture? Are we looking at the full data when we are claiming 35%? Actually, no, because 75% of the sexual violence victim, they do not go to the authority. They do not go to the law enforcement agencies to disclose or to report their experience. So we only have the partial picture. So why don't the victims go and report? There are a couple of reasons. For example, they fear about victim blaming. They have some fear about consequences. They do not have the information where to report, hopelessness, shame, etc. So these not reporting constitute a silence that has been impeding the reduction of the occurrence and impact of sexual violence. So a little quiz for the participants. If you go to slido.com from your browser or from your cell phone and provide this code Q532, you'll be able to participate in this poll. So when did the Me Too movement start? I will take a couple of seconds for people to go to the link and participate in the poll. The options are 2006, 2012, 2017, 2018. Okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. So the most right answer seems to be 2017, 79%, and 2006, about 19%. Let's move on. Okay, actually, the movement started in 2006 when Tarana Burke, after listening to one of his peers' experience, started the movement. And she is continuing the movement, and hopefully she will be releasing a documentary on the Me Too movement. The Me Too movement got the attention, it got viral in 2017 when Alyssa Milano, a famous actress, she started this, she tweeted about sexual violence with tweeting this exact tweet, and this tweet went viral. And Alyssa Milano also acknowledged that she wasn't the starter. She acknowledged that Tarana Burke actually started the movement. And after that, Twitter and other social media platforms were kind of received a lot of sexual violence reports, a lot of data tagged by Me Too and other variants of hashtags. And so here we're seeing how many tweets. So there are about 19 million tweets in Twitter since October 15, when Alyssa Milano first tweeted Me Too. And this is showing the data of last year, of 1 year, since September 27, 2018. And we see that the number of tweets kind of get increased after a certain popular event. For instance, on October 17, we see a huge spike when Harvey Weinstein resigns. There is another spike when Leslie Moonves resigns from CBS after new allegations of sexual misconduct surface. So what's interesting is, even though there are some spikes, but we see a continuous trend, a continuous flow of Me Too hashtag data. So the Me Too movement created an unprecedented opportunity for people to express their untold feelings to the world. So here are some examples. For example, here one person is saying, an old guy at Wendy's moved me aside in line by grabbing me by the hips. And this movement was not confined to a certain population, for example, or certain gender. So here is one example from a gay person. So I was sexually assaulted by women at work. I spoke up immediately and it was laughed off because I was a gay man working in a gay bar. So millions of Me Too posts in Twitter allow us to learn the severity of the violence, the victim's relationship with the perpetrator, location and time of the incident, and victim's emotional response and other attributes. Given the Me Too tag tweets, as an information science researcher, we want to ask, first, what are the types of sexual violence that are reported in the tweets? For instance, here, my boss raped me. It was my first duty station and I was 20. So the harassment or the violence that the victim went through involved penetration. The second thing we want to understand is, who are the perpetrators? What is the relationship between the victim and the perpetrators? For instance, here, the perpetrator is boss, who is person in power. A similar other possible perpetrator could be coming from family, friend, coworker, etc. And third, at what age did the victims experience the violence? So for instance, here, this happened when she was 20. And with this, we want to analyze this data and see if our analysis matches with existing research based on other methods such as interviews and surveys. So is it simple task to analyze this data and find this information? So when we started this project, we found a lot of challenges. Number one, a lot of tweets are not related about the Me Too movement, even though they were hashtagged by Me Too. For instance, here is one example where there is Me Too and a lot of other hashtags, but it is not about the Me Too movement. And some tweets are actually questioning the purpose of the movement and not actually supporting or providing any sexual or self-reports. And some are actually against the movement. For example, don't forget the millions of women who abuse their sexuality to make career. Some tweets are related, but they are not reporting self-reports. They are just supporting the movement. The other challenge is there are too many tweets, and it's not possible to manually check each and every of them to understand all these three information that we are trying to analyze. And there are retweets, so they are not self-reports. They are merely supporting, or they are merely just wanting to share other people's self-reports. So the way we approach the problem is we try to use machine learning, natural language processing to identify these three information, and also at the same time wanted to be accurate in our analysis. So first, we collected about 1 million tweets from October 15 till October 31. That is the time when the Me Too movement was at its peak. We used Twitter API. And after that, we removed the retweets. We only confined ourselves with the original tweets. We translated the non-English retweets to non-English tweets to English language. And we created a set of guidelines following the CDC sexual violence indexes. For instance, who are the possible perpetrators, what are the possible age ranges, what are the possible categories of sexual violence. So we followed CDC guideline to create those annotation guidelines. And then we annotated a subset of tweets, about 20,000, using Amazon Mechanical Turk that were used to train our machine learning models, and which we upload over the large data set to understand all this interesting information. So here's an overview of the classification process. So given a tweet, we first apply a multi-class classification model to understand if it's a sexual violence report or if it is not a sexual violence report. If it is a sexual violence report, we want to understand what is the category of the sexual violence. Does it involve penetration? Is this non-contact? Is it sexual contact or other types? And for each of them, we want to understand what are the roles of the perpetrators. Are they coming from family, intimate partner? Are they person in position or power? Are they friends, stranger, or maybe there is no perpetrator mentioned in the tweet? And if it is mentioned, then we want to understand what exactly is the perpetrator mentioned. Is it a boss, boyfriend, husband, etc. And here we use a sequence labeling model to understand the exact phrase that has been used to indicate the perpetrator. So here's an example. So if the tweet was, "An old guy at Wendy's moved me aside in line by grabbing me by the hips," then our classifiers probably would say this is reporting a sexual violence of sexual contact because the word grabbing, and it is coming from a stranger, and the exact phrase is old guy. So once we have this manual annotated data and once we have the classification models, we applied the models over the large data that we collected using Twitter API and applied these models to see the extent of the sexual violence reports. So in total, we had about 500,000 tweets after doing all this cleaning. And there are about 100,000 sexual violence reports. And there are about 59,000 sexual violence reports that are self-reported, not of some other people. These are coming from the individual who are tweeting it. And we only confine ourselves to the self-reports that are of very high probability. So when the model is very confident that this is a self-report of a sexual violence, we treated that and we analyzed that in future analysis. So in summary, we analyzed with 25,000 sexual violence self-reports that had higher probability. So another quiz for you guys. So which one is the most reported category, you think? Is it penetration, unwanted sexual contact, non-contact sexual experience, other? Again, you can use the same link and this quiz should be in your monitor using your browser or mobile phone. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So looks like unwanted sexual contact is the winner. Let's see. Yes, actually unwanted sexual contact is the most frequent type of sexual violence that we find in our data. And the next frequent was that involves penetration. So about 42% of all the sexual violence self-reports that we find are about unwanted sexual contact. And the least one was non-contact type sexual experience. So who are the perpetrators of these bad things, of this sexual violence? We find that about 36% of the perpetrators are strangers. For example, person maybe in the street or shopping mall or other places. And only 7% are from intimate partners, and 10% are coming from families and relatives. So this gives us an aggregated view or a high-level overview of different perpetrators and their response and their participation in the sexual violence. But we wanted to go deeper and see who are the perpetrators and how they are kind of involved in the violences. So here are some exact phrases that we find about the perpetrators. So in the family and relatives, we find uncles, cousin, brother, unfortunately father. Friend, in the friend and acquaintance category, we find male, boy, family, friend, neighbor. in intimate partner, boyfriend, ex, in stranger, old man, man, stranger, guy, etc. In person in power, boss, teacher, professor, supervisor, manager, etc. So here's an overview of how the categories, for example, is it involving abuse or assault, attack, etc., are associated with the different roles. For example, boss, boy, boyfriend. So most of the categories are marked by he or man or some pronouns which are not very kind of indicative. But some are really interesting to look at. For example, boss is very correlating with or have high occurrence with harassment or grabbing, and boys with grabbing and so on. And this 48 from directory is probably coming from Harvey Weinstein's reports. So here we wanted to see how many occurrences are there. So you're looking at the frequency, how many occurrences are there for the sexual violence of different types and the perpetrator categories. For example, here we find that the most common reports are about unwanted sexual contact, but perpetrated by strangers. And the least common is non-contact sexual experience by intimate partners. And when we look at the percentages, we see that the intimate partners mostly conduct penetration-related violence, about 62%, but penetration is least done by the intimate partners. Another interesting finding is strangers mostly commit unwanted sexual contact, and about 5 times more than the second best category. And person in position or of power, authority, etc., and strangers, they are significantly more responsible for non-contact sexual experience than family, friend, or any other intimate partners. So the last quiz for you, which is the most vulnerable age group in your opinion? Below 12, 12 to 17, 18 to 24, 25 to 44, 45 to 65, above 65. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so looks like the winner is 18 to 24. Let's see. So in our analysis, we find that the most vulnerable is 12 to 17. About 43% of their experiences have occurred in that age range. And the next, almost pretty close, is below 12. And then 10% on 18 to 24, and it decreases as the age increases. So here are some examples from this age category. For example, I was 8. He was my home tutor. I still see him sometimes. And from this age being 12 to 17, I was 12. The first time I was sexually harassed. And the third category, quit my job when I was 19 because of it. So we wanted to understand who are the perpetrators that are most responsible for doing violence for these age categories. So here we're looking at the age categories on the x-axis, on the y-axis, and the x-axis we have the perpetrator categories. So strangers are very responsive. Almost 85% of the cases for above 65 are coming from the strangers. But what's interesting here is if you look at the below 12, most of the perpetrators are coming from family and friends and acquaintances. And as we move forward, as we move on the higher ages, this goes from family to friends and the person in power. So these findings, so the take-home message I would say from this project is, yes, Twitter, there could be discussion about whether Twitter represent the actual population or not, whether Twitter is biased towards younger population or educated population or not. Our analysis does confirm some of the existing research analysis. For example, we find that perpetrators who were closer to the victims are responsible for more severe sexual violence compared to the less closer perpetrators. And we also find that the most consistently reported factors, for example, the age between 6 to 11 and 12 to 17 are the most vulnerable age groups. So these are the findings that are already they are confirming the existing researches. So this gives us a confidence that we probably can use social media as another way to look at the sexual violence problem and understand the extent of it and understand different attributes of the whole large problem. So I want to acknowledge my excellent collaborators. So this work was started when I was at University of Mississippi, and I want to acknowledge Claire, Amrit, Jason, and their contributions. This is done with collaboration of Auburn University, University of Toronto, and University of South Florida. And with that, I will conclude here. Here you can see my email address, my Twitter handle, and I have provided the links to the papers. If you have any question, just feel free to email and ask it here as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was amazing. I want to start real quick by saying, when I introduced you, I said Philip Morris College of Journalism, and thanks to Sarah Ann Oates for correcting me, it's the Philip Merril College of Journalism. Okay, and now a question for you. Nisa asks, says that you mentioned the type of data that's often found in the tweets, and that there are 4 different types you mentioned: type of perpetrator, age of victim, type of assault, and the victim's feeling about the incident. But the 3 research questions you focused on were the type of perpetrator, age of victim, and type of assault. So could you discuss why you didn't include the data on the victim's feelings about the assault?
That's a good question. So I didn't add that because we're still working on it. So that is not ready for releasing in the public yet. So that's why we haven't added that yet, but we are working on it.